Of all the developers out there, one of the ones that get the most positive reception is CD Projekt Red, the Polish developers that have been making games for quite a while now. But the one title that put them on the map was 2015's Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, a title that allowed a whole generation of gamers to fall in love with this lovingly crafted and beautifully written game. And also CD Projekt Red had a real customer focused approach, treating gamers to free DLC, extra goodies with their physical releases, and they were also against greedy monetization like microtransactions and loot boxes. So after the successful Witcher 3, hype was incredibly high for their next game, Cyberpunk 2077, originally announced all the way back in 2012 and is based on the Cyberpunk tabletop game to make for a highly original adventure. For 8 long years, fans have been eagerly anticipating this title, more so than any other title I think before. Over the years, we have been drip-fed info and small trailers, but it wasn't until 2018 until we finally saw some actual gameplay. Critics and gamers alike were won over by this fantastically futuristic adventure. Hype was incredibly high for this title, and it was originally planned to release in April 2020. Then it got delayed to September, then November, then it finally came out a couple of weeks before Christmas. The year's most anticipated game is finally here, but was it worth the near decade-long wait? Well, let's find out. First, I'd like to state that many of the review outlets out there have been reviewing the PC version, but I've been playing on the PS4 and PS4 Pro. I haven't had a chance to play on the PS5 because they are incredibly hard to get over here in the UK. There is a noticeable difference between consoles and PCs, so as you may know by the reception online. So to be clear, this is the review for the console games, so with that out of the way, let's begin. Set in the future, in the year, yes you've guessed it, 2077, we follow V, our user-created character, as they try to make a name for themselves in this amazing looking place called Night City. You can choose V's own life path, whether you like V to be a nomad, a street kid, or live a corporate lifestyle. Once you complete the tutorial mission, you then head off into Night City to start making a name for yourself. The jobs come in steadily until this one big job that should set you up for life arrives, and in typical fashion it all goes belly up and you're left for dead with Keanu Reeves in your head, and you need to find answers to find out what's going on. I'm not going to say any more about the story because it's best for you to experience it for yourself, but rest assured the tale here is actually really quite good. It's constantly engaging and surprisingly feels very human at times, with less bombastic action moments and more slower paced character development scenes, and I really actually like that approach. The characters of Night City also play a big part, and right from the get-go they're an incredibly great mix of characters and personality. From Jackie, your partner in crime, he's incredibly likeable, and behind that big tough persona he's just a big softie at heart. There's also Judy, who you meet fairly early on in the game, and after some events you actually have to help her out to find somebody important to her, and she's a very strong and tough woman who takes no crap. We also have the very much hype and much talked about inclusion of Mr. Keanu Reeves. Yes, the Matrix and John Wick star is here, and he does play a hefty role in Johnny Silverhand. Johnny's backstory is very interesting, and you do get to see that play out, but for the majority of the game he's sort of the devil on your shoulder, offering you his personal views on the current situation that can give you an idea on how you can tackle an up and coming decision, and if you mess up a situation, he certainly criticises you. At first he does seem a bit of a dick, but he quickly grows to be an important part of the story, and I really liked him nearing the end. When first booting up the game, you have to choose your character's life path, and this has been an incredibly most talked about feature, so I was a bit wary of what to choose, because I wanted to know what was the difference. So I searched online to find out what the actual difference between each life path was, and there isn't much. You get a different starter mission and a few different dialogue choices throughout the game, and that's it. It's a shame that not each of these life paths were expanded upon. It's just a mission and a few dialogue choices, that's it. Very disappointing. Then you have to create your character, and you can pick your character's gender, face and all the usual stuff to create your own personal V. There's even options here to customize the male's V's penis and the female's V's breasts, and honestly I think this is a silly inclusion that does nothing for the game. Also, I have to admit the character creation is a bit basic, as there isn't many options here. Yes, it's still more than what you get in most games, but in my opinion Saints Row 3 and 4 had a far more in-depth and better character creator tool, and that's like 7 or 9 years old depending on which game you look at. Anyway, after a rather hefty prologue that takes you a good 6 hours to complete, you're then let loose in the open area of Night City. And a lot has been said about Night City, the fictional setting of the game in the trailers. It certainly looked unique, and now finally be able to explore it. Night City is an incredible setting that has a lot going on with it, with many different futuristic buildings and a huge sense of scale. When walking around the streets though, it can feel incredibly lifeless, with huge empty streets with hardly any pedestrians or cars about. It's a shame because there is a fantastically designed open world here, easily one of the best I've seen of the generation. It's just a shame that it doesn't really feel lived in, it just feels like everybody's at home. But hey, walking around the city does impress when you first try it out, even with the technical restraints of the PS4 with many neon lights and interesting looking locales. When you press the map, you do have a feeling of a Ubisoft open world title, as the map is chock-a-block full of things and icons to do. It's very jarring at first, but honestly don't worry about it. It's just a load of side missions and shops. There's hordes of side missions to do in Night City. Some are very daft and silly, like this dude with a burning crutch, but we also have plenty of heartfelt and very well thought out stories, one of which is situated in the apartment block where V lives. The game's main storyline is rather short compared to other RPGs at around about 20 hours, but the longevity here is mainly housed in its side missions. Exploring the huge open world of Night City will certainly take you a long time if you walk, so you'll need some wheels to get around, and thankfully there's a decent range of vehicles at your disposal. From normal cars to sports cars to even motorbikes, there's a good amount of variety here. It's a shame that there's no flying cars or anything, but hey, what we got here is still decent enough. When first getting into a car, it kind of feels a bit like the cars on ice. I was sliding from one side to the next, but again, like the combat, I got used to it and it did help changing the camera from first to third person. You can get in any vehicle you like in the city by hijacking it a la GTA, but don't worry about the police because they're absolutely useless in this game. They're like a chocolate teapot, walk around the corner and they won't follow you. It's pathetic. So if you want a vehicle, there's plenty of opportunities as there's various missions that pop up offering you to buy them. Some are cheap enough, but if you want the best cars you have to be prepared to fork out for it, and some of the side missions do grant a great amount of money to help with that. As for the upgrades, you can upgrade V how you see fit. When you start off creating your character, you can dole out some skill points and various ability categories like intelligence, reflex and body, to name but a few. When you level up, you also gain attribute points. The higher the attribute level, the more perks you can unlock in that attribute. The higher attribute levels also dictate your gameplay, be it a higher hacker level to help you bypass an area, to different dialogue choices to learn more about the story. It's nothing really too complex, but it's nice that it's there nevertheless. As for the perks, you gain these when you level up V, and you also earn extra perk points when you level up specific skills like gun handling, hacking or melee weapons. These perks you can unlock start off with basic stat boosts to abilities to make hacking easier and consumables more effective. There's a lot of perks here, some are helpful, though quite a few of them are pretty useless to be fair, offering just small little stat boosts. A big part of the game is fitting your V with new mechanical implants. You buy these through Ripperdocs, and these cyberware upgrades enhance your V with new abilities and perks. Some of them are cool, like the double jump and the ability to slow down time, while some of them just increase your damage or heal ability. They're fun to add, but bar a couple of important implants, you could live without upgrading V. On to the combat now, and surprisingly there isn't a lot of combat in the mainline story. Yes, there's plenty of shootouts, but not as frequent as I thought. When you get into combat, at first the gunplay may seem a bit floaty and not very accurate, so don't go in expecting Call of Duty levels of shooting here. It does take a little bit to get used to, but honestly once it clicks the shooting is fine. Melee combat with your fist is also available, but for me it's not that great. There's a dodge counter mechanic here, but honestly you could just get away with winning a fight with spamming the punch button. Same rings true with the melee weapons like bats and katanas, but at least the katanas look pretty cool. But if shooting isn't your thing, you can go in through the many areas quietly taking out enemies with some stealth tactics. You can get behind enemies, take them out quietly, either by killing them or knocking them out. There's also some hacking abilities here which feel a bit like Watch Dogs. You can highlight an item and choose what you want to do with it. Hacking can be a bit awkward at first, but after a little while you can get used to it, and it can be incredibly handy if you're aiming to get through areas without killing anyone. The game also features a fair few choices, from small bits like how other characters react to your replies to more interesting parts where missions can change completely. There's also extra side objectives here that can also make missions easier. There is an example I had where I let a character live only for his team to come and kill all the guys who were helping me find the object I need, which was pretty cool. There's also some bosses that you can skip entirely by talking your way out of it. There was this dude who owned a nightclub. I needed some information and I could have just killed him and got the info I needed, but I talked to him, persuaded him to give me his help, and I got out without spilling any blood, which was another cool moment. But these choices are only a very small part of the game. I wish they made bigger impacts on the story, but many of them are one and done for the missions and don't have any lasting impact, which is a huge shame. On to the game's length now, and surprisingly, as I said before, the mainline story is a fair bit shorter than I expected, taking you around about the 20 to 25 hour mark to complete. It's a manageable length, though I could see some being disappointed by that, but there's a lot of side stuff to keep you busy. We have loads of side missions, as I said before. Each of them are well written, some are quirky, while some still have that plenty of depth, like the Witcher 3 missions did. We also have gigs, which are another type of mission that help you with fixes to give you more cash. There's also police patrol, things that see you beating up a few goons, as well as collecting some evidence. There's also a few little collectibles to nab. They're nothing really much to worry about, to be fair. To fully see and experience everything Night City has to offer, then you're easily talking about a good 60 to 70 hours plus, which is more than enough to get stuck into. So far, I've talked pretty fondly about the title, but now it's time to talk about performance and the technical side of things, and this is where the game shows its true Achilles heel. On the PC, the game is a rather lovely looking title with a decent but not amazing performance and a multitude of glitches. But for consoles, there's been a lot of hush-hush about what's going on with them. We've seen very few videos, but they've only showed little parts of the game, and there's also been a lot of caution due to the reviews only being allowed to show trailer footage, and leaked footage on consoles at the time looked rough. Finally, in my hands, the game is frankly a mess on consoles, especially on the base consoles. On base PS4, we're looking at a dynamic resolution of 900p, but it can drop all the way down to 720p or even below. On the PS4 Pro, however, it is a little bit better, with a dynamic resolution that mostly sticks around the 1080p mark. Overall, on the Pro, it's a much more stabler in terms of resolution than the base PS4. There's issues in both parts of the game where the image may look a bit blurry, so I advise you to turn off film grain, ambient occlusion and motion blur to improve the image a bit. It's like a little resolution boost, and it does make the game look far more prettier. The frame rate isn't much better either on both base PS4 and the PS4 Pro. The game is locked at 30 FPS, which isn't a problem. The problem is it never really gets to 30 FPS, especially on the base PS4, where the frame rate is all over the place. Walking around Night City, you're occasionally talking about 20 FPS, but get in a car and drive around and it tanks to 10 FPS, with occasional pausing and popping. It's completely awful that CD Projekt Red classes this as a finished product. On the Pro now, and thankfully the frame rate is improved, mostly sticking to that 30 FPS cap, though in busier sections and in a couple of sections in the early part of the game it did drop to 20 FPS. Thankfully, with more patches it has improved, but it's not perfect, but it's more than enough playable. Those lucky few who've managed to get a PS5 will no doubt have the best experience on consoles, as the game runs at a much more improved resolution and an unlocked frame rate that aims for 60 FPS and mostly sticks to it. There's still a fair bit of popping, however, and there's a lot of reports of crashing on the PS5 if you play for long sessions of play of more than 2 hours or more, though apparently in the recent update this has been improved. The footage used in the trailers is a far cry from what you actually get on consoles. I know the game wasn't going to be a one-to-one copy of it, but damn, this is a huge downgrade. Textures are incredibly muddy and take an absolute age to load. Character models look nightmarish without any textures loaded in, and there's a sort of Vaseline-like smear to the graphics, making it all look very blurry, especially on the base PS4. Don't get me wrong though, the game can look incredibly nice sometimes, mostly inside in the less busier areas or outside wandering the wildlands. There's no doubt sacrifices had to be made to get these games to run on these aging consoles, but it does feel like CD Projekt Red shouldn't have bothered with the older consoles and focused more on the new current gen consoles of the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. Technical issues continue with a huge abundance of glitches. There's a lot of these stupid daft ones that don't hamper gameplay but does take a heck of a lot out of the immersion and the experience. Characters clip in and out of the sceneries. There's reports of a certain part of a male's anatomy that likes to clip in and out as well, which is rather embarrassing. I've had cars just popping up in the middle of a cutscene, character models doing T-poses, and multiple bits of audio playing at the same time. It's incredibly sloppy, and it's something honestly you'd get from a Ubisoft title. Actually, it's worse at times than a Ubisoft title when it comes to the technical side of things, and it's a real shame. As for game-breaking quirks, I've had a few of them, like one where the game's opening mission, there's a drive-by shootout in the streets of Night City, but for me the shootout never actually happened. The car dropped by, but nobody got out to shoot. It was certainly an odd and quite funny experience. I've had a more common issue like the game not recognising my preference for the camera whilst driving, to not being able to run after exiting my car. These seem to be fixed by pressing the DualShock Sport touchpad. I've also had a few UI issues where text would just linger around for ages or the instructions would just stay on the screen. It is a shame that the game has so many of these issues, as it's incredibly enjoyable when the game works. Audio here is again a bit of a mixed bag. The voice acting is fantastic, with the many different talented voice actors doing some wonderful work, and the big man himself, Keanu Reeves, does a sterling job at being Keanu Reeves. He steals every scene he's in, and a very welcome inclusion to the game. The soundtrack is also pretty awesome, with some great license and original songs in the game. Though wandering around the game in the open world, there's a horrendous bad audio mix, as you could wander around without any background music or characters not even speaking. It's odd, and again, this is another thing that needs to be fixed. Conclusion time now, and Cyberpunk 2077 is probably one of the most hardest reviews I've ever had to write. Cyberpunk on consoles is just a complete mess on the base consoles, whilst on the Pro and PS5 it's more playable, but there's still issues here. There's a glimpse of a game that could be great, as there's a lot to like here, from its brilliant story, cool settings, fun RPG mechanics, and Keanu Reeves to name but a few. There's a hint here of a game that could be something special, but for all the positives, the game's performance on the base PS4 console is just dire, and frankly broken, with its awful resolution, frame rate that dives to 10 FPS, and glitches and technical issues aplenty. It's simply unacceptable to charge £50 for what is a broken product. The game should have just launched on the PC, then brought the game to PS5 and Series X next year. The game should have been shelved for last gen consoles completely. I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to give scores to each version of the game. One for the base PS4 and one for the PS4 Pro. So here it goes. For players on the base PS4, I give Cyberpunk 2077 a 2 out of 10 with the title of horrendous. At the moment, for that console, it's a very broken, buggy and unenjoyable experience. There is a game that could be great here, buried beneath the technical issues, but as it is, I would steer well clear on that console, wait for 3 to 6 months and see how the game changes then. As for those on the PS4 Pro, I would give Cyberpunk 2077 a 6 out of 10 with the title of OK. Yes, it's still got a fair few technical issues and the frame rate problems, but it's a far more playable game here on the Pro. I actually enjoy playing the game on here, completing missions and exploring the world. There's still work to be done here, but if you're eager to jump into Night City and have a Pro, it's a pretty decent experience. As always, thank you for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you could like and subscribe, that would be great. And as always, until next time, happy gaming. Bye.